The next round of 32 matchup is between Houston, 1 seed in the Midwest, against Gonzaga, the 8 seed. Gonzaga really put it on Georgia, jumped out to a 27-3 lead early in that one, and then never really looked back. Ended up winning by 20 or so. Houston dominated SIU Edwardsville. That game got up to 41 at one point, and then Houston really just sat everybody and started playing around. Got a bunch of guys in, but just showed their dominance they have against inferior opponents, especially on the defensive end. It was like 70-30, like midway through the second half. So, I think it's going to be a little bit different here. Of course, it's Gonzaga. It's going to be a lot different, but one area where Houston typically has some success, or a lot of success, is turning teams over, right? They're 15th in the country in defensive turnover rate. But Gonzaga, led by one of the best point guards in the country, Ryan Nembhard, has them sitting 5th in the country in offensive turnover rate. So I don't know. Obviously, Houston, with the way that their defense is played, they're still going to turn them over, but they're not going to have as much success as they typically would have against most teams because of the ability of Gonzaga to take care of the ball.
Yeah, this is a pretty fascinating matchup, in my opinion. I think, like you said, the turnover rate, not disparity, but the fact that Gonzaga can hold their own in that area at the very least, because I do trust their guards. I trust Nembhard and Hickman and Battle to an extent, but Houston, their defense, they'll hard hedge, they'll blitz, pick and roll. They're going to force the ball in Nembhard's hands right away, force him to get the ball to the roll man. But I feel like I trust Gonzaga in like the short roll creation, like guys like EK. I think I trust him to make the right decisions out of the roll, out of the short roll. And I definitely trust Brayton Huff, I think, to make the right decisions out of the short roll. So they definitely have options here. And you have to beat Houston's defense with weak side shot creation. And I guess it kind of comes down to, do you trust Nolan Hickman and Caleb Battle to make shots? And I feel like sometimes it's hit or miss, especially with Battle. But because I think Hickman, he shoots like 40% on the whole season. So he's been fine in the catch and shoot area. And it's not an area that they're like frequent in, like second percentile and in spot up frequency, but they're 92nd percentile in efficiency. So I think you can trust them when they get these opportunities. One area for Gonzaga's offense that is going to get cut off is the post-up game. So when this game slows down in the half court, Gonzaga loves to play through the post and loves to play through EK and Huff in those areas. And Houston will double that. And even when they play a single coverage, they should have success with the length they have inside with guys like Roberts and Francis and JoJo Tugler. Like, they should have a lot of success there. Could really frustrate EK, could get EK in foul trouble and even Huff a little bit. So that's definitely something to monitor. So there's a lot of contrasting like opinions going through my head when I think about, can this Gonzaga offense have success against Houston's defense? Which I definitely think they can. But I think it's going to come down to how Houston can score against Gonzaga. On paper, it doesn't look fantastic. Like Houston, they love to get on the offensive glass. That's where they create most of their value. Gonzaga's a pretty good defensive rebounding team. Once again, I think the foul trouble situation is something to monitor. Like if EK and Huff pick up some early fouls, I think Houston's going to end up getting all over the glass. And Houston's also really efficient from three. They don't take a ton of threes, but Gonzaga does a really good job contesting threes, and they're one of the best three-point defenses in the entire country. They just 29.8% three-point defense. So I kind of trust Gonzaga to defend most of their, to defend LJ Cryer and Sharp and catch and shoot situations and even off the bounce. And the interior, I know you've talked about it a little bit, like the rim protection isn't really there for this Gonzaga team, and they've done a pretty good job of keeping teams away from the rim and, kind of forcing teams to operate off the dribble and dribble jumper situations. And like Houston doesn't really score all that well at the rim either. They're not a really good 2-point offense, so I don't really know if Gonzaga can get exposed there. But I don't know. This is a matchup that I feel like I have a good feel for. I just don't really know who to take. So, because I'm just going to take the team I trust a little bit more in Houston to squeak this game out. But I do feel like this game has the feel of the game that Houston loses every single year. Like to the team that has a ton of talent, they take care of the ball at a high level and they can shoot over the top. So, but I will take Houston to win this game.
Yeah, I think this is just a game that Houston kind of just finds a way to win. This is one of those ones that they just kind of like they try to make it as ugly as possible. Similar to that game that they played like at Arizona, where they struggled a little bit and tried to just like muck that game up basically and turn it into a bit of a street fight and try and limit the possessions like they always do, right? I mean, they play what 360th in pace. Um, they that's just the kind of game they want to play. And similarly to like what we talked about with Drake, right? Like if Houston gets a lead, and they're bleeding 20, 25 seconds off every shot clock, and they're up like 8, 10 points, and they're scoring in those possessions, like becomes a bit dooming for the opponent. So I don't know. I mean, I think this is just a game they find a way to win. I think they try and make it ugly, and try and cut off Gonzaga's more up tempo style of play. They're top 50 in pace. Good news though, like you said, where Houston has struggled is against teams that are able to shoot over the top of them. They lost to Texas Tech early in the year, and then second time around at Texas Tech, they got a lead actually, and Texas Tech actually was able to climb back in late because of their shooting. So good news for Gonzaga. Nolan Hickman coming into today, he'd been struggling actually from three. He's had a good season overall, but his last five, he'd been 6 for 23 from behind the arc. He'd been pretty short on a lot of his threes through the West Coast Conference tournament. But then today, obviously snapped out of it, went 5 for 6 from three, 5 for 7 overall. So definitely good news if you're a Gonzaga fan, seeing that from him. If he can continue that stretch on Saturday, I think Gonzaga is able to make this game pretty close. I'm worried about Huff and Ike in the foul department. Feels like every game they pick up 2 in the first half, and then one of them at least ends up with 4 with like 8 to 10 minutes left. And you're kind of playing that do I bring him back? Do I not kind of game? And Mark Few kind of battles with that. Feels like every game. So that'll be something to monitor because Houston just wears teams down on the offensive glass. And as relentless as they are, like I wouldn't be surprised to see those guys pick up some cheap kind of like lazy fouls. I think Ike at times can be a bit lazy, especially on the glass. So if he just kind of gets outworked and ends up committing some boneheaded fouls, that wouldn't surprise me at all.
Yeah, I mean the good news is if those guys get in foul trouble, you'll get more Diani minutes. I know you'll love to see Diani minutes, and I think that'll be pretty good rim protection against this Houston front line. He got a few minutes sprinkled in today against Georgia. I don't know. I don't think he's a Mark Few big necessarily. I think he's good, but I don't think he's like a Mark Few offensive centric big, and probably won't have much of an impact in this game. But yeah, definitely an interesting game, and it's just unfortunate that these two teams had to draw each other in the second round. I think they should have found a way to avoid putting Gonzaga on the 8 line. I don't think it was fair to anyone. This is probably a top 10 team in the country, especially after the way they played today. So yeah, it's going to be a really fun game. It's going to be unfortunate for whoever has to go home the first weekend.
Yeah, definitely. Wish they'd stuck this Gonzaga team with like Tennessee or St. John's, a couple teams. I don't really care if they make it to the second weekend. But unfortunately, here we are. But anyway, we're going to side with Houston here to squeak one out. I kind of expect a closer game here, and Houston maybe has a little bit of a scare, but finds a way to move on to the Sweet 16.